Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Banner and Backbone. I am Nick Perro, and this is a vet talk today, joined by some of my good friends and colleagues here, other veterans. So I'm Nick Perro. I am a Army veteran. Sergeant, got out. I was in human intelligence collection, and I am a trained interrogator. Just to preface this conversation about who I am and what my experience is, I went to Afghanistan in 2014. I was trained to do interrogations for detainee operations at Bagram Airfield. I did not do those, however, I did on base processing and in field detained individual management and biometric collection. So I understand how detainees and detained individuals of unknown statuses, such as we'll get into it in the conversation, of people who are unknown statuses. I know how to handle them properly. So welcome. I'm Nick Perro. That's my introduction for who I am. I'm co-founder here at Banner and Backbone. Melissa Corrigan is the next person I'll introduce. She broke an incredible story this weekend, and one that we're going to talk about all about it today. She's going to lay out a bunch of facts and information. Melissa Corrigan, coming from Blue Amp Media today. It's really good to see you, Melissa.
Thank
Welcome. How are
you.
you? Before we
Great.
introduce our incredible guest.
Great. And I'll give the same background so everybody has a frame of reference. I was an IT2 when I left the Navy. I had a TSSCI clearance and was the crypto tech on board the Eisenhower. So I was responsible for the receipt and management of high side message traffic as well as crypto materials. So that feeds into this story to a degree.
Thank you, Melissa. Glad to have you with us. And next, and welcome back for another Vet Talk with us. This, I think, is our third time having you here on a Vet Talk, Bobby. You're our third, you're our first three-peater,
Oh,
I believe, which is
Yep.
incredible and so much fun to have you. I'm so glad to be joined by retired Commander Bobby Jones, who is the president of Veterans for Responsible Leadership, and has a wealth of knowledge and background from the Navy. Bobby, it's good to see you, sir.
uh, thanks for having me, Nick and Melissa, and I cannot tell you, for those in the chat who are listening, you cannot ask for better subject matter expertise based on what the heck is going on right now. Because, bottom line, I did a 22 plus year career in the surface Navy and all this other kind of stuff. So yeah, this is right up my wheelhouse too, to include command of a Riverine squadron, but understand something here, people. Information is a weapon, and the restriction of it or the withholding of it, no matter if it's classified, confidential, whatever you want to label it, is significant. And what we're dealing with right now is information warfare. Forget the kinetics for a second. I want everybody to just focus on how this current Secretary of Defense, and we're gonna get into the timelines and stuff like this, is cavalier with information 1 second, and then restrictive the other second, depending on the wants and the needs of the administration, and it's almost regime like. So that's just my opening salvo. I just want to make sure that y'all are aware that we got subject matter experts on that.
Good. Bobby, thank you for joining us, because
Mm-hmm.
I have some questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
As someone I'm the only non-Navy veteran here.
Mm-hmm.
I can say I do have family who is Navy, and I'm proud to say that, even as a soldier who was in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
Go Army over Navy. However, I do have connections in the Navy, and I appreciate the work and the service that you all do. And I understand some of the hard missions you all go on that we didn't, in different ways. So thank you both for being with us, or with me today. Thank you both for coming on and having this discussion. I want to hand this over to Melissa for a little while, and have her lay out the facts, because Melissa broke a incredibly important story. As I was saying at the beginning of the show, She broke an incredibly important story this weekend, and I'd like to make sure everybody knows what the truth is. Simple, hands down, from
Yep,
the source that broke it. So, Melissa,
absolutely.
please take.
Yep. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. And
So
I
I'll just
will
lay
also
it.
put the before you get in, I will put the QR code up for the article to replace the
Mm.
Feeding
Yes.
America one here in a moment.
Mhm.
So the QR code next to my head, I actually pointed in the correct direction this time. Next to my head, that QR code is going to be for Melissa's article here in one moment. So take it away, my friend.
All right. So I'll just thing happened and get into the material that I received. So late at night, I was in bed on October 20th. I got a message and signal from a source that I have in the DoD, and he transmitted a document with no caption, no anything. He just said, "You need to see this." After he sent it, I opened it up and I read through it 2 or 3 times and was absolutely flabbergasted. So here is the account as it was sent to me. This details the 17th of October after one of the boat strikes. So 2 survivors were identified on that strike. They were retrieved from the wreckage of the boat and they were brought on board the Iwo Jima. The Marines are those who actually retrieved the detainees and brought them on board. When the detainees hit the ship, a handful of shipboard personnel came down to greet them to begin the protocol of covering with video coverage the detainees coming on board to document everything that happened. The Marines pushed back at that time and said the Commodore had issued an order for no video footage. Um, there was conflict. The shipboard personnel for the Navy pushed back. There was some back and forth. Ultimately, the PAO said, "I want you to go ahead and document." So the documentation did begin around 1300, which is, or I'm sorry, around 1500, which is 3 p.m. So they did do video documentation. They set up cameras in the med bay because one of the detainees was in really, really bad shape. Obviously, he had survived a boat strike. It was pretty amazing. They both weren't in really bad shape, but one was in really bad shape. They went ahead with the documentation, and then at 1700, so less than 2 hours later than the documentation actually began, the order came down, and it said in the document, the order came down from the admiral to delete that video footage. To their credit, enlisted personnel pushed back. They asked for guidance. They asked for protocol. They asked for law. They asked to see something. There was again some back and forth on whether or not they should actually delete that. JAG issued the final order to delete the footage, and they did, in fact, delete all the footage of those detainees while they were on board the ship. That's their onboarding, and that is the entire close to 26 hours they were on board our vessel. They were then repatriated. To our knowledge, there is no evidence of a tribunal. There is no evidence of any trial, anything like that. In fact, in the field, if you're going to be identified, because what JAG said is the reason that they were deleting this footage is because these were unprivileged belligerents. According to the Geneva Convention and corresponding military code, in order for them to be designated as unprivileged belligerents, there needs to be a tribunal. It can be an in-field tribunal, which means, in the zone, in the moment. But to our knowledge, what we have, that did not occur. So all of a sudden, and in fact, in the document, they start referring to them as detainees, and they switch their verbiage to calling them unprivileged belligerents, which is apparently the reasoning for deleting this footage. Um, so I read this document over and over. Uh, absolutely astounded. As you can imagine, deleting any material, whether you're talking classified material, whether you're talking video or photographic evidence, is completely beyond the pale. I've never personally encountered any situation. I do know during my training, when I served as the crypto tech on board the Eisenhower, it was very strongly stressed to me that that is not done. You do not delete anything. Destruction of expired crypto material is a different situation than deleting anything. So this is the situation as it lies. So I went back and forth with the source. I immediately said, are you sending this to me because you want me to make it public? And he said, I want it to get to someone who can perform oversight and do what's right. Something is wrong here. That was the sense. Something is wrong here. I am afraid that I have done something that's going to come back on me, right? So I began working every connection I had to try to get this on the desk of a senator. And like I said, I was in possession of this for 46 days, and only on the 45th day, maybe late 44th, was I able to get confirmation that that document went through a couple of trusted, confidential, all veterans. I'm proud to say this was an entire mission, and we got that off of a senator and into a closed door Armed Services Committee meeting where it is now being considered as part of evidence. And then I went back to my source. I continued communicating with him. Okay, we have it to the senator. He was contacted by another senator, so that was one good thing. And they're also in contact with the Orders Project, so there's some legal representation going on there. And only after I was completely sure and assured by the source that they were completely comfortable did I go ahead. But he declined New York Times. He didn't want to go that route. And I believe he wanted me to present this story because as a Navy veteran, I could use some verbiage and phrase and word things in a way that would insulate this group of people who are choosing to step forward very, very bravely and courageously to get this information to our senators and to the Armed Services Oversight Committee so that justice can be served.
Wow. Um, I don't know where to begin. Well, I do know where to begin. I'm still
Yeah.
It's a lot.
here's my yeah. So here's my thing. The military teaches you for so long to be able to have military bearing to separate your emotion from what you have to do. And literally since retirement, this is about the first time where I feel like I have to do that, dealing with military issues, because the blatant disregard for not just Geneva Conventions, but the United States' own protocols. Blatant. And I know people on the EWO, it's mind-boggling because I know those people would be like, what do you mean we got to do this, that, and the other? And so, Melissa, let's start breaking this down. First of all, the first boat strike was September 2nd. Okay. First time the Southcom JAG, Judge Advocate General, complained about what was going on was the same day, September 2nd. Admiral Halsey, the four-star that was in charge of Southcom, who resigned. He resigned, and this is key for everybody to take a look at, October 16th. This strike happened the next day.
Well, now I have
Okay.
to also add that now
hmm
I was given information late last night that there is actually some confusion on when that strike actually happened. And there apparently
Mm,
has been something floating around that potentially this strike happened on the 16th, which makes everything with the Admiral that much more interesting.
makes total sense. And that is why I wanted to bring up that date, because everybody's going to be looking at this as a strike, this, that, and the other. I want people to look at this from the standpoint that the United States military, the United States Navy in particular, its organic moral fortitude was to say this is wrong, up and down the chain of command, from the 4-star admiral that was in charge to whatever rank and rate that the person that got you that information understood that this is wrong. Forget JAGs, forget lawyers. They knew immediately that it was wrong. And so Admiral Halsey does the only thing he really can after months of pushing back against this thing even happening, these things happening, and the literally boot on deck plate saying, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. The lowest ranks of our people who actually process and do this for a living, who are trained to do it. Now, the other thing that I want to highlight, if we go back to when Hegseth took over, the first thing they did was fire the JAGs that were at the top of each branch of service. What people don't realize, though, there's a trickle down effect.
Mhm.
There are other people who have been highlighted, targeted, et cetera, et cetera. It is not a coincidence that the order, based on your reporting there, Melissa, that said, hey, delete footage, came from the legal authority of someone whose entire chain of command could be compromised.
Right.
That is not a coincidence.
Right.
Because this, and this is the thing that I don't know what mainstream media is doing, that, you know, they talk to all these admirals and generals, 4 stars, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they need to talk to some cats that boots on the ground like you guys,
Right.
and even myself to a degree. Because here's the thing. This is a systemic ripping apart of all the fail-safes and checks that the United States military has to avoid being compromised or even appearing to be compromised.
Right.
Think about that. You the people that you go to for legal justification, completely wiped out and put back into with replacements. Tim Palator, who I served with on USS Normandy, okay, when he was a swole before he went to law school. This man's in uniform talking about how the senators that did the video could be, you know, we should recall Mark Kelly, but you're in uniform. You have no business even making that statement.
Right.
But because you're Pete Hegseth's personal lawyer, you're compromised too. So the entire legal chain of command that will sit there and say this is a legal order or not, wiped out. And Hegseth told you that's what he wanted to do when he got those generals and admirals together in Quantico and referred to rules of engagement as stupid
Yes.
and woke.
So
Right.
before you go any further, Bobby, can you repeat the last thing you just said? Because that is so very important, and I think it's something that's missing, like in its entirety, almost, is
the systemic and planned destruction of the legal safeguards of the United States military and how it acts. Yeah, definitive. Because what you have is a commander-in-chief who believes war is a 1980s action film.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And he found a guy who was insecure enough because he failed at leadership. And let me be very clear for those who are not vets watching this stream. To be an 04 major infantry officer, I don't care if it's guard, I don't care if it's active, I don't care if it's reserve, to be an 04 and not get company command because you suck is terrible. Am I right, Nick?
Oh,
Am
yeah,
I right?
yeah. If you got made fun of, I was part of the E4 Mafia at one point. I got out at E5, which means I was an NCO. I was a sergeant. But when you're part of the E4 Mafia, you make fun of people like that. Even as sergeants, you make fun of people like that who are like,
bingo.
Oh, hey, you weren't good enough for your command. Like,
Yeah.
you weren't even good enough to like do that. You were
Yep.
so bad at your job, they wouldn't even
Yep.
give you like 20 soldiers to command, 50.
Exactly.
Like you're too bad at your job. He sucks. He really does.
But so when he was giving that speech to, you know, the admirals, generals, and senior enlisted of the entire United States military,
What an insult.
he got to a point where he was talking about this is the type of rules of engagement that I wanted when I was leading, and he had to pause because he wanted to say company, but had to say platoon.
Yeah.
Go and look back at it. I was like, yeah, you SOB, you know you weren't good enough. The United States Army said you were a bad leader before the rest of the world figured it out.
Mhm.
So when you look at that, when he made that speech and referred to rules of engagement and tried to politicize the constraints and the restraints that the United States military puts on itself to be within the Geneva Conventions, to be within United States Code of Law of Armed Conflict, all of these things that generations, by the way, of military members have actively not only executed, but been able to be mission effective, is mind-boggling. It's planned. It's planned. Trump said it while he was running. They get Hegseth, and the first thing they do is remove the legal barriers, and as they put in the official statement, the legal constraints and barriers to what we want to do. And what is that? That is to use the military as a direct arm of Donald John Trump. Period. Not the America's military. He's got us marching down the streets of freaking United States cities. He's got us shooting boats and blowing up things with no due process. He's literally, and he just put out the national security strategy this past weekend on a Friday, like a Friday news dump, like it was some bad news. Why? Because he's the first president in 10, count them, no, I'm sorry, 11, to sit there and say, we don't care what Russia does. Hey, Europe, pick up your arms and defend yourselves, because that worked so well the last two times they did it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
this is the Russian security strategy that was rolled out.
Yes, absolutely. And telling Europe to, hey, go ahead and get your weapons, go ahead and form your little clusters again of alliances. And hey, good luck to y'all, because World War I, that's exactly what happened. World War II, that's exactly what happened. And we have had peace relative to those conflicts for 80 years. And you've got the one dude born right after the conflict ended at 79 years old, sitting there saying, I don't know a thing about that history. I know that I want to make money. I know that I'm transactional. And I know that at this point, you cannot tell me that Putin does not have some type of compromising material on this man, right? There's no way you can convince me otherwise that, hey, United States, the Cold War, everything that you did, we're throwing out the window. The freaking millions that died to create this peace, throwing out the window. Whatever Russia wants to do, we're cool with. How does that relate to Venezuela? It relates to Venezuela because he is enacting the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, which is one of the reasons the United States was left behind internationally from the first place, and most importantly, became targeted in World War II because we were like, oh, it's not, we're isolationists. It doesn't work, especially in a globalized world, a globalized economy. But Venezuela is him trying to reassert that all that matters is our backyard, and all that matters in that backyard is where all the oil fields are, and all that matters is we can prosecute and persecute people that are brown who are in charge of those oil fields. It is all connected. It's all connected, people. And if you don't see it, if you're not paying attention, when a draft happens and your kid has to go, because we started a damn war that no one wanted, then you'll care.
Yeah.
Then you'll care.
Yeah, it's the strategy that is going on right now. Before we get back to Melissa's story, is a hemisphering of the world, or hemispherication. I don't know how to say that word too well yet, but it's hemisphering the world. That's the strategy. It's a Russian strategy. It's to give the corporate interests what they want, but that's not that's not the overarching story right now.
No.
But that's like
that's
a big point in all of this. This is all connected and all together. Yeah,
connected. But then here's the other piece, Melissa, and I want to because first of all, this is brilliant reporting you've done. I'm sorry I went on my rant. I need to hammer.
No, thank you for going on your rant.
What you're no, seriously, like the importance of what you're doing. The fact that the PAO, the public affairs officers, like, yo, you need to record this. For those that don't know, in the United States military, the public affairs officer has no tactical command. Okay? They are there, part of the information warfare type of piece, to shape messaging.
Yes.
But even the public affairs officer, using what little clout they had, because they control cameras, basically. It's like, you need to record this. Their spidey sense goes off. Let me ask you this, Melissa. In your previous life, if someone told you not to record something that you knew by standing orders of either the captain or regulations of the Navy, what would be your first reaction to hearing that?
I would push back. I mean, I would record, like, you know, and if anybody, like, I've had this conversation a couple times today where, you know, it's easy to hypothesize what we would do in that moment. But if you've never been in the military, you've never been in the Navy specifically, when you're out on a ship and you are excluded, you're away from your family, you're away from trusted people that you could maybe go to confer with, and you're given an order that you find suspect, it's extremely, extremely difficult to expect our lowest enlisted members to push back on that order without the backing of officers behind them. It's virtually impossible, because you're asking them to either openly defy that order and say no, at which case they may be thrown in the brig, or to compromise what their own moral and ethical beliefs and to go ahead and follow an unlawful order. And it's just a really disgusting place to put enlisted people. I can't stress enough that the trickle down toxicity of Pete Hegseth has reached the bottom ranks. Evidently, I mean, it's very obvious when you have Marines and sailors arguing on deck about what protocol to follow. That's absurd. I've never in my life seen that. Everybody knows what the fucking protocol is.
I agree.
I mean,
Okay.
The fact that,
so as
go ahead, Nick,
as somebody who's held command, Bobby, would you have ever ordered to delete footage?
No, for two reasons. Number one, the integrity of what you know your standing orders are, of the regulations of the United States Navy, that even if, let's just say, the CEO of Iwo Jima said, okay, I'm writing a temporary standing order saying we can delete footage when I want to. You know what? Your standing orders does not supersede U.S. Navy regulations, and it sure as hell does not freaking supersede U.S. lawful code of war conduct of war. It doesn't. Because those people that wrote that are way higher than you up the chain of command, brother. I'm sorry. So that's number one. It's that. Number two, and this is very, very key. I have to live with myself the rest of my life. Keep in mind, they just blew up a boat and killed people. They brought on survivors, one of which barely clinging to life. Okay? For your own protection, you want to make sure and document you did things the right way.
Right.
The right way. But for no other reason, for your conscience to feel better that I followed the regulations and protocols that were laid out, right? The fact that you had people, and this is the diabolicalness of what's happening. The fact that you have people that have been selected and put in positions to do these things, to remove the constraints and the restraints of our armed forces, shows a calculated callousness to human life and to anybody else that is not considered someone in the actual good graces of the United States, because all of a sudden we're playing like we're God. We're juror, executioner, all this kind of stuff. And the fact that if any of this was to happen to an American service member, this country would lose its apoplectic mind.
Agreed.
And that's the litmus test, people. If it happened to an American sailor, if an American sailor on one of my 34-foot patrol boats in the Riverine Squadron got blown up, 2 of them survived, and then we do this, what would be in store for the country that did that?
Right.
What about even a civilian? Because we're not, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, is we're not legally we're not in a legally declared state of an armed conflict, because Congress has not appropriated the funds or had any evidence produced for the initial strike. Initial strike is what we should be only talking about at this point. It's like there's been 85 deaths or more since then, and 20 something strikes. Like, how is this? Why do we even need to be here? Like, how did we get to this point where it's taken 22 strikes and a possible double strike on, or not a possible, and a happened double strike on people?
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the original point, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What would have happened
No.
if, I'm going to ignore what I said for a second. What would have happened if this had been a civilian ship, just blown out of, let's say, any civilian boat, big mid-sized boat that's just
Mm-hmm.
off the
Mm-hmm.
Mexican coast, let's say off the Mexican coast, and Mexico decided to blow it the fuck up with civilians on it,
Well,
what would we have done? And then said, oh, they're drug runners. What would we have done as a country?
so let me blow your mind for a second, Nick. As far as the world is concerned, they are civilians.
No, I know.
Just because the United States labeled narco terrorist or whatever new term that we're coming up with, here's the process, right? If you're talking about just United States action, say it's unilateral, fine. The fact of the matter is, you got to go to Congress and get an authorized use of military force, right? Now, the commander in chief, historically and traditionally, can respond and take decisive action for a very short, limited amount of period of time, like a 24-hour period, 40-hour period, whatever, because of the urgency of the current conflict, if there is one. Right. But the next thing that they are supposed to do is to go immediately to Congress. It doesn't even have to be all of Congress. It needs to be the Senate Armed Service Committee and probably the Intel Committee too, jointly meeting and saying, hey, here's what we got.
I would even argue
Here's
the
what we
And
got.
see, if you
Appropriations
wanted to
Committee.
do that, wouldn't having
Yep.
video footage and 2 detainees and whatever you
There
got
it
off their
is.
boat? So all you're
Yep.
telling us with this action is there was nothing on the boat. You have no evidence on them. You blew
Yep.
up 2 fishermen. You brought them on the boat and realized, oh shit, these guys are nobodies. They're not any narco terrorists. Just get rid of them. Get rid of everything.
Yep. Yep. No, yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Melissa. And this is the thing that's blowing my mind about this, right? We're talking now double digits of these strikes.
Right.
So obviously there's sustained operation happening, and they have not gone to the members of Congress. And Nick, you talked about the appropriations too. You're absolutely right. In a perfect world, but even just if I just talk to the armed service committees of both the House and the Senate, bring in the intel guys to brief them, right? So we're all on the same page, because the way the Constitution is set up, the reason that it is the people, representatives of Congress, that declare war is because the entire nation is supposed to be on the same footing when you do something. That is the difference between a monarchy and what we have, a constitutional republic, people. That's the difference.
And not just that.
And so
that's the reason
go ahead,
George
Melissa.
Washington did not want a standing army, because if the standing army stops representing the civilians and starts representing the interest of the man sitting in the White House, what are we doing? That's no longer a military of the people.
Exactly. And so now you have authorized repeated strikes, right? Without any congressional oversight. And if you do it perfectly, after you do all that, you address the nation.
Yes.
From the goddamn Oval, and you sit there and say, my fellow Americans, here's what we're dealing with. Now, never mind the fact that they keep talking about fentanyl, and fentanyl does not come from freaking Colombia or Venezuela. Never mind the fact that it's interesting the countries that they are picking on and what they have in their economic exclusion zone, which is 200 nautical miles off their coast, the most untapped, most oil-rich reserves in the world.
Right.
And never mind the fact that the number 1 and number 2 contributors of Trump's campaigns have been the AI people and the oil people, and they are getting legislation and all this kind of stuff. Forget the conspiracy stuff. I'm just presenting, like James Baldwin said, the facts.
Right.
This is what you are showing me, okay? And throughout all of this, they have not identified not one, and I mean not one, killed boatman since this thing has started. You didn't lay out a freaking resume of what they may have done. You're not even trying to cast doubt because you don't care.
So
You're fighting a war that doesn't exist for a substance that's not being trafficked there. If you really wanted to impress me with the fentanyl thing, you'd be dealing with Mexico.
Right.
But you tried to sneak on board there, and you saw what happened there. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, and the president of Colombia, when he received that detainee back in the condition he was in, he made an announcement that day. Hey, the U.S. just dropped this guy off clinging to life support, essentially. What kind of diplomatic disaster is it that we can't just point to video and say, hey, man, we pulled him out of the water like that. We didn't do anything to him in the close to 26 hours he was in our custody. Now we can't say that. We can't say that. The diplomatic disaster is unspeakable.
You know, it's interesting. When we finally got Osama bin Laden back in 2011, right? They recorded the raid, but also they recorded the preparation for his burial at sea. And they released that not to the public, but to governments that had interest to make sure all this stuff was on the up and up. They happily released it. And they did so in a manner because they recognized if we go in and do this from a political standpoint and do not show that we followed rules of engagement, that we follow Islamic law, burying this dude at sea, all of this will come back on us, right? That's what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when you have professionals in the room. You can agree or disagree with their policies, but as a Department of State, as a Department of Defense in particular, those two, you better have subject matter, classically trained experts in dealing with these type of issues, to which we have none. You have Marco Rubio. The only thing he cares about is Cuban liberation. He doesn't care about anything else, so he gets walked over. Hegseth is nowhere near the real negotiating table with Ukraine, Russia, Taiwan, the ASEAN nations. They give him culture war stuff. We're going to make sure everybody's in shape. We're going to make sure trans and gay people don't have a place in the military. Culture war, culture war, culture war, which is what he's always fallen back on when his actual competency comes into question. Always. If you look at his career, he falls on culture wars. When he was, accused of the wife beating and stuff like that, he releases a book. I mean, this is what he does.
And what did he say in that book? He even bragged in that book about telling the very few human beings he was in charge of that they didn't have to follow the orders in the field.
Yep. He's been saying this for the longest time. And it's one when you are a Fox News weekend B team host that gets drunk any opportunity you get. It is another thing when you are in charge of the world's most powerful military. Because here's the other litmus test I have for people out there who think we're going high and right with this. Could you imagine if President Barack Hussein Obama tried to do these things?
Right.
Could you imagine if he's like, I tell you what, we're going to go down to Brazil and that dude Bolsonaro and stuff, we just going to start killing their citizens.
Yeah.
Because he's conservative. And we just going to start, just locking them up, throwing them in the hell with them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to march down every state capital of every red state in America. Oklahoma City and Austin and this, that, and the other. And we're just going to run your cities, run your towns. What would they be saying about that, man? What would he be saying about him? This is the same people that got on him for wearing a tan suit because it looked too good.
They'd call it an invasion. They'd call it what it is. It's like it's a soft civil war in every sense of the word because nobody's fired from the military on U.S. people, citizens, totally yet that we know of. But we have citizens being detained. We have service members being fucking detained right now. Service members, just because they have a Hispanic last name and they don't look white. That's it. It's all about white supremacy and white violence right now. And that is running Pete Hegseth. And that is who he is. That's his shtick, and it's ugly and it's gross and it's detrimental to our service members. And one of the questions I wanted to have for both of you, as would you on a vessel, when you bring somebody aboard, and we've already talked about you keep footage and you wouldn't ever order it deleted. Would you have known standing procedures and policies on how to properly handle and transfer individuals from, say, the Marines into naval custody? And
Yeah.
then would you release that individual without, or those individuals, if they were injured, without properly having them stabilized? Would you ever let them go back to their home country without a competent tribunal adjourned or convened? And who could overrule a, say, four-star admiral's decision to not
Mm.
delete those sort of things, or commander's decision? Like, who
Mhm.
can overrule these things? Because I think it's important to know really
Oh,
who
that's all
are the
Bobby. That's
ones at
above my
fault.
pay grade.
So Bobby, way above
Yeah.
my pay grade, because I was enlisted, and
Right.
my thing was, y'all never worked as officers, only enlisted. Like, that was, our phrase was,
Fair enough.
don't call me sir or ma'am because I work for a living.
Yeah.
But officers work their asses off in different ways, and there are
Right.
certain ones do in good ways. And so, Bobby, I'd love your take on this.
So this is where this is where officers are supposed to make the big bucks. You talk about the enlisted do the work, and we're supposed to do the thinking, right? So to answer your question, there's no way that should happen. There are protocols. So when a ship goes on deployment, right? Whether it's an individual deployer or part of a larger group like a carrier strike group or amphibious ready group, they go through these workups and training cycles, right? And part of those workups and training cycles is they flex all these different scenarios where you have to have your instructions and stuff and your protocols up to date, right? Up to date. And so I watched Hegseth talk to at this forum this weekend. He was actually being interviewed by one of my Annapolis classmates, Lucas Tomlinson, who used to be on Fox News, and he said something he talked about TTPs. He loves to throw military jargon out there to civilians because it sounds like he's tactical, which is just basically technique, tactics, and procedures for those of us who are in. We know what that is. It's basically how do you do shit, right? Well, he was sitting there saying, these things change based on what the president wants, blah, 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 right? Here's the thing. When you are dealing with what, say, the Iwo Jima is dealing with in that 4-star, which is the combatant command. And for those who don't know or don't remember, combatant commands are the highest level of joint task force that we have in the military. You got nine of them total, 7 of them or 6 of them are functional or geographic, 3 of them are functional. So Southcom is the highest level that anybody who's in command can have over the southern, hemisphere in our, so that South America. So you had Halsey that was there, and then the only person he reports to is the Secretary of Defense. Period. And then the Secretary of Defense reports to the president. But when you go down, it's Halsey, and then you have what's called the component commander, in this case, the maritime component commander, right? And that's usually a 2-star, maybe a 1-star, depending on the mission, this, that, and the other. You have one for land, you have one for maritime, you have one for air, you have one for joint special operations, blah, 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 right? And then you get down to, depending on the mission, the Iwo Jima's actual commanding officer, and then the departments. By the time it gets down to what Melissa is doing, as a crypto, say a second class petty officer, that's E5. You've got 6 different layers of command above you, right? Now, here's the thing, though. You have an operational chain of command, which is the trigger pullers, and then you have the administrative that deal with the man, train, and equip. What's interesting about the legal side of it is they deal with both. They kind of bridge both of those chains of command, right? The legal JAGs have the authority to jump in and be like, hey, you can't do that on the operational side. Or when you do the administrative stuff after you get a detainee and they pulled out of operational forces, like, hey, these persons have these sorts of rights, which is why the JAG thing was the first thing they went after when they took over. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not a coincidence. And
Right.
so when you can control the JAG Corps and the people who say what is legal, you're effectively dealing with and destroying possibly 2 chains of command that the military needs to operate. The problem with this is when you are trained to go to that JAG for legal advice, and now they're overruling what you were trained on your entire career, the crisis of conscience happens. That's what's happening. And so could you say no? Could that E5 say no? Could that second class petty officer with them 2 chevrons that they worked and busted their ass to get do it? Yes. But they could also go to captain's mast because of it, or Article 15, as you guys saying on the land side, right? And lose all of that because they did the right thing. And so by Halsey, the 4-star saying, deuces, I'm out, y'all are wrong. He is trying to not only stop the madness and call attention to it, but he's leading by example. What a concept. Leading by example, saying, if my 4-star 40-year career has to go in order to keep the standards of the United States Navy that we've had for 250 years in place, then so be it. And everybody beneath me needs to take note. And I'm going to say this too. It is not a coincidence to me, as someone who knows that man personally, because there's so few black officers that become senior and get scrambled eggs on their hat. We all know each other. That man is a black man that did this. Okay? We're used to standing up when everybody else wants to sit the hell down. Period. That man went to Morehouse College, the same college that Dr. Martin Luther King went to, that Benjamin Mays went to, hell, that Samuel L. Jackson went to. We don't tolerate bullshit. I taught there at Morehouse. So I'm not shocked that this is the guy that had to stand up and be like, this is insane. And the second he did it, what did the right do? Well, he was a DEI admiral anyway. It's a goddamn combat pilot. Okay? It's like, this is, look, America's soul is at stake with this administration.
Yes.
I'm not going to sugarcoat this anymore. And every time you want to know what it means to be in the right, go find the black community in this country. We'll show you what's right, and we'll do it. We had 11-year-olds march in front of dogs and fire hoses in the Deep South where I grew up. So to have a man who's from Fort Valley, Georgia, who rose to the rank of a 4-star when people told him he shouldn't even be a pilot, be the one to say, no, this is not the standard, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked, which is why, as someone who's retired, I have to speak up because he can't. This is insanity, people. And the fact of the matter is, the fact that you have the biggest imposter syndrome case in DOD history running things, talking about some FAFO, you know what I'm saying? Using terms, by the way, black people invented to try to sound cool, looking like freaking Howdy Doody on steroids up there. You know what I'm saying? This is ridiculous.
I literally was just on this morning with Julie Regensky, and she said that she would like go out drinking with him when they worked together at Fox. And she said there's a reason they didn't even give him like a show. He had a weekend gig. They wouldn't even let him run his own show, you know, placing the entire military and the weight and the historic weight and the global importance of our military in this man's hands may be one of like in the top 10 of Donald Trump's worst moves. It's got to be.
Listen, the reason I think he has not fired him, but that I mean, first of all, I mean, there are reports they want Kristi Noem out, they want Hegseth out, and they want Kash Patel out. Now, none of those three were qualified to be in the position they were in. Now, we all know that. They're just sycophant people who just wanted to lick boots, right? But here's the thing, people. Here's the thing that should terrify everybody. They're doing lasting damage to the very institutions that we look to for protection. Do you think it's a coincidence that the FBI, who's supposed to protect us onshore, the Department of Homeland Security is supposed to protect the borders, and the United States military that's supposed to protect us abroad, right, are the ones that are having the most radical policies thrown at it? That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. Secretary of Treasury, yeah, they're messing up the economy, but we've been there before, done that. People will recover because money's going to recover, right? When you look at these things that they're taking apart, trying to form the new world order, it's making Americans less safe. The more melanin that you have in your skin, the less safe you are, the more that you're being put behind the 8 ball. And here's why. It is because there is a fragile ego that deals with mediocrity. Mediocrity. When you talk about DEI and woke, when I look at Hegseth, I think of a man who never came close to earning the position he had. Never. And for all of us who are watching him, we have to speak up where we can, because those who are directly most affected, and I mean not just the military, but I mean those members of Department of Homeland Security. I mean the FEMA workers who are being furloughed. I'm talking about the Department of Education people who have been told not to work, but all of a sudden come back to work because they don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, we got people dealing with our nuclear energy that were fired and told to come back because they didn't know what the hell they were doing. All of these people want to speak up that work in the federal government, but they can't. So what are we going to do? Do we just sit here and continue to watch this? I'm watching the alliances that my grandfather and many of them fought and bled for getting ripped apart overnight because you have a guy in office who believes the world is supposed to serve him and him only.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Same with me. My grandparents were there too. Like this is destroying our legacy. All three of us on this chat, but so many of you in the chat with us on the live. Like this is your legacy being destroyed. If you NATO is being ripped apart right now. NATO is being destroyed.
I got to ask
That's
you,
what's
Bobby,
happening.
I noticed during my time that was far more brief than yours. I was there when it seemed that overnight, every screen, every TV on the ship, in the gym, on the mess decks went from ESPN and this and that to Fox News. Fox News, everywhere you looked. What do you think that's done to now? You have, that's 20 years ago. So you've had a full generation, a full enlistment, a full generation of military service members who have been led to process things in the Fox News way. How do you think that impacts them and their willingness to refuse an unlawful order, their willingness to push back if they've been trained in this Fox News mindset?
Right.
That everything Pete says is right, everything Donald says is right. We're all doing, this is all good for America, putting America first again. What do you think that's done to our particularly enlisted men and women?
I think I'm boy, whew, girl, you're hitting some topics. I think it's one of the three most detrimental things that have happened to the United States military post-Vietnam. And I do not say that lightly. I say it because the indoctrination of what Fox News has done, it goes beyond the inflated ego that we already have as Americans, right? We believe if we say it and we put a flag next to it, it's going to be right. It's going to be right. But most importantly, it has given a generation of military members, federal workers, anybody that's supposed to be working in government, supposed to be helping others, it's given them this righteousness of groupthink that is eating at the core of being able to assess things for what they are.
Yes.
And so what I mean by that is me and you can look at the same thing and all of a sudden we argue about the facts of it. But here's the thing about the military, as opposed to doing that in the political sphere, which senators love to do, right? Bullets, bombs, and munitions do not discriminate based on your beliefs.
Right.
The physics are sound. Someone could die. It's like, so when you don't know how to assess the situation, and I'll give you a perfect example of this, right? So part of my career, I got to be one of the only 30 out of the millions of people we have in the military, be American peacekeeper with the United Nations, with the Blue Bonnet, deployed to Liberia after the civil war they had there, where they used child soldiers. And it was interesting because the other Americans, a couple of Americans that were with me who were white, they would look at a situation in the bush and interpret it one way, and I looked at it completely different. And when a trouble spot would pop, they would always send me because there was this other layer of experience that I had. And it was not born in the arrogance of, I'm the American, I'm here to save the day, blah, 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 blah. No, it's of someone who has a lot of dang melanin in his skin, and I know exactly how they're going to perceive that because I had to deal with Europeans and Americans, of Caucasian persuasion all my life. I know how this is going to go, right? The fact that Fox News has cemented that mindset. How explain this to me, Melissa? How is it that you can have that station on where you have someone like a Jesse Waters or something like this sit there and say, well, those brown people or black people or this, that, and the
Right.
other, when the first place military recruiters go to recruit are in the black and brown communities?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And then you want to subject us to that. Nah, brother, not doing it. Not doing it. And it comes from mouthpieces in Fox that typically have never, and let me be very clear, had to sacrifice a damn thing. Jesse Waters, no. Greg Gutfield, no. These clowns of political theater sitting there saying this stuff because it's all about the ratings. And then we get the court documents of when they get sued showing that
Right.
they know that they're being clowns, but
Right.
they're not thinking about the detriment. Detriment is now we're dealing with Venezuela, right? We got these large deck ships off their coast, and you've got an entire generation now of sailors and Marines who automatically assume that those people are less than human because of
Yep.
what they see on Fox. And so now, if they're less than human, do the laws of armed conflict really apply to them? Is it okay if we rough them up a little bit? Is it okay if they suffer a little bit more? That's the ripple effect, Melissa. But
Mhm.
then strategically and politically, to hear people like Tom Cotton, Mr. I went to Harvard and served for 3 years because I needed to run for Congress, those clowns sit there and repeat the talking points and show the coordination of it. You're not an American military force that's trying to help the world. You're an American military force trying to reinforce superiority complex, which
Right.
in the long run is probably not going to work out for you.
Yep.
No, and I want to wrap the conversation up because it's right at the top of the hour, and I want to Melissa and I have another engagement here in half an hour. Is before we go though, I want to ask. I've never been able to ask this question to somebody. I should have asked this question at some point to you, Melissa. Is in this chain of events on a Navy vessel, because I was an Army interrogator. We had a very specific spot and role and when we could do interrogations, when we could do field operations, when we were authorized even to ask questions in the field. Like we had to be authorized that on a vessel like this, say the USS Iwo Jima, where these two men were detained. Oh, sorry, camera's doing weird things. Where these two men were detained and then released from. Would there have been an interrogator and possible interrogation in this process? And if there would have been, do you believe that they have done one? Do you think they may have done one? With what you've now learned about what's going on and what you also know about this administration, do you think they would have done an interrogation, and do you think they would have done one legally using legal interrogation techniques and not torture?
You want to go
It's
first, Melissa?
it's so hard to tell. Again,
Yeah.
gosh, I wish we had photo and video to prove that we didn't do that. So without that, it's anybody's guess. I don't believe that any maybe I'm favoriting the Navy right now, but I don't believe that that would have happened on a Navy vessel purely, really because of the space constraints. You're not going to get away with something that isn't going to be seen by a lot of people on a naval vessel. There's not a whole lot of space to do that. So simply for the space constraints, I would be curious. I'd be curious to find out what those corpsmen think that treated. We know one of them went to med bay and got treated. So I would be curious as to what they assess the injuries to be and what they assess the source of that injury to be. And now that there's this potential information that that strike could have happened 24 hours earlier, is there an indication that they were on a floating vessel for 24 hours? Were they with those Marines for a longer amount of time? We just don't know that timeline now.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with what she's saying, especially on a large deck amphibious assault ship like that, yes, they're going to have intel people. You got different flavors. You can have special forces, you can have expeditionary intel, which those guys I got to deal with a lot in the Riverines. But you're going to have people specialized to do that, especially if they knew this was the mission before they even left. And if they didn't, they can definitely fly someone out there. So I definitely think that there.
Well, I will interject that we do know that there's a vessel. I'm not going to give the name, shipping container vessel, and it exists to carry special forces and intel. So we do know that is in Southcom with the rest of the fleet.
Makes sense. Here's the final thing that I will say though. And again, Melissa, I cannot stress to you how big a deal this report is. Like, I'm still processing it. But you never have to turn off the camera if you're never doing anything wrong.
Right.
This goes to police stops, traffic stops. This goes to the conduct of war, going back to when they first put freaking cameras in hot air balloons to observe World War I. You don't have to turn off the camera when you haven't done anything wrong. The fact that an order came down from high, and I mean high above based on what we're seeing here, tells me that not only did they know they were doing something wrong, but this was pre-planned to do something wrong. And based on the additional reporting with not just from Melissa, but everything from the Washington Post, blah, blah, this is now the new operating procedures in that area of the world. And that is why Congress not only needs to get involved, not only has to do the investigation, but if need be, forcibly remove and impeach people who are put in those positions. Because it's all fun until the rabbit gets the gun. And when Venezuela ramps up and now we're in an actual armed conflict and one of our guys is captured, stand by.
Yep.
And with that, that's a great point to end on, is we can't let it keep escalating. Like, we cannot let this keep escalating. And one of the ways that we don't let it continue to escalate is we keep pushing back as loudly and as openly and voraciously and truthfully as we are, but we also help build each other up so the voices can get out. So I want to make sure everybody gets a quick moment here at the end of the show to sell yourself and where we can find you so others can support you if they haven't already during the show. There's 400 people here, so you may as well sell yourself, Bobby, for a little bit. And I'm sure most of them do already subscribe to you, but from my lips to your ears is go subscribe to Bobby Jones. He's worth it. He's fucking amazing. He does incredible work. And he is a powerhouse voice out there. And he's bringing truth right now. And I follow and listen to him, and I'm proud to stand by his side and work with him in this fight for democracy. So, Bobby, please sell yourself and how people can find you.
No, thank you. I mean, yeah, you can QR code screen, QR code the screen right there. But yeah, I'm on Substack. I do a weekly live stream with Lincoln Project in Lincoln Square called Anchor Watch, where we break down what's happened over the week. And I can already tell you this is definitely going to be on the docket. Thanks, Melissa. and also the release of the new national security strategy. Because here's the thing, people. They want you to remain ignorant, and they rely on your ignorance to get away with this stuff. What we try to do on our show is break things down and put it where the goats can get it, as Joe Madison used to say. Put it where the goats can get it so you know why you should care and how this is going to affect you. So from the national security strategy, it's going to change your economics. It's going to make your prices go up. But most importantly, God forbid, if we get into conflict, things are going to change. But most importantly, I need Americans to get involved with your local government and call your congressman and ask why things aren't happening. They listen. There's a reason all of a sudden Republicans are talking about resigning and not running again. There's a reason, because people are calling. Keep it up. We are Americans. This is our country. The whole premise of this thing was not to follow one person. That's the whole reason. We ain't perfect. Lord knows we ain't perfect. But I can tell you what we ain't. We ain't a monarchy.
Right.
That much we ain't. So.
And that's a big point that matters. We ain't a monarchy, and we're not going to be one. We said no to a king once. We're going to say it again,
right?
Especially a supposed one. Melissa, how about you? I know I don't have Blue Amp Medias right now, but Melissa,
that's
tell
all right.
yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. Any subscribers are welcome, paid or great, because now I'm going to be building a legal defense fund.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't afford it right now, I totally understand that. But subscribe and share this story. I published on Blue Ant Media. And that has been a tremendous platform to getting this story out. And my point, the point of the source that brought this story to me, is for each and every one of you to take this story and take it to your congressman and senator and say, what are we doing about military personnel deleting video of
Mm-hmm.
what's being done right now? So that's my challenge to all of you.
Thanks, Melissa. And we'll put out a script if we need to for others. I saw somebody in the chat asking, Melissa, what do we say? How do we phrase this?
You can say it just like that. Say, we all know now that the military deleted video. Where is that video? Why was it deleted? You need to answer the American people.
And I'll make sure to caption that and write it down for the show notes later for everyone so that everyone can call. That's your action item for the day is go call. Support Melissa, support Bobby, and then if you've got time, come support Banner and Backbone so that we can bring you more of this. And I'm Nick Perro, and I'm not going to sell too much today on Banner and Backbone itself. For the rest of it, I think it's more important for Bobby and Melissa here. But come support us if you need to, or if you can. This way we can bring more interviews like this. We can get more stuff out there. I'm going to be putting more information out in some new articles around the law of maritime war because I'm going to bring myself up on that one specifically because I was in the Army and I left maritime war to the boat sailors. You guys get your water time. We had our land time. But come support us here in Banner and Backbone, where issues like this are real and important, and we want to continue bringing them. So thank you, everyone who's in the audience with us. Also, thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate getting to talk to the both of you again. And seeing you guys do all the work you are doing is incredible. So please keep it up. I truly appreciate being a part of this community and getting to work with the both of you. And hopefully we're elevating your messages and getting them out there to a broader audience so everyone can see the truth and we can make an impact because we need a more perfect union. So let's go get there. And maybe we could take out In God We Trust away and do E Pluribus Unum again, because out of many, one. And that's what we are a nation of, is out of many, we become one great nation, not like this. This ain't the way. So have a great afternoon, y'all. You'll see Melissa and I again here soon. Bobby, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your time and hanging out with you.
No problem. Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, I learned a lot today. And everyone, hopefully you learned something in the audience. We'll see you again soon. Have a great afternoon.
All right.